Hello, we're Boon Baum, and we're the collaborative artist duo of Anna Baumgart and Joe Boon.
Hi.
And we've been artists in residence at Thurman Woods for this week. And we ran a workshop yesterday, which we will be just showing some pictures of in a minute. And
So, just a little bit about what we were doing. So, actually, about ourselves first. So, we used clothing and textiles as our main medium of choice, and we also work with live performance and video and architectural intervention. But at this residency, we've been working with intervention within nature. And we often make work in public, and our work opens up spaces of play, learning, and interaction through live performance.
yeah, we kind of often say our work takes like an expanded notion of the concepts of dressing and wearing. So we often ask the question, what do we wear apart from our clothes?
Exactly.
So yeah, for this residency, our proposal was to investigate the parallels between the Wood Wide Web, weaving, and digital social networks.
And the Wood Wide Web is the collaborative network between fungi and plants that exists beneath our feet in the soil.
So yeah, the workshop we ran yesterday was called What We Weave, and it was all about different forms of collaboration in relation to these networks. So we're just going to share the screen and show you actually what we were doing. Workshop was kind of working together with participants in the forest in the Thurman Woods, and we were using blue ribbons to weave in between the trees. And the weaving was kind of an idea of mapping the network that lives underground, the mychorrizal network, but also in relation to digital and social networks, which was done through green screen technology. So we'll just run through the images to demonstrate that a bit better.
So the green screen technology was actually we used blue fabric, and we chrome keyed out the color blue because obviously we were working in nature. So working with green would have been a bit tricky. And you can see here one of the participants weaving a screen, and we tried to do different types of weaves. So there were 3 basic weaves: plain weave, satin weave, and twill weave. And you can see this participant doing twill weave. And yeah, there were more screens being created between the trees. This one is an example of plain weave. And yeah, Lena and Gub, they were making one which was more of a satin weave.
And yeah, everyone was working in pairs, so it was sort of always about this collaborative act. And so each pair sort of wove a screen between 2 trees, but then also around these trees we wove sort of a whole network of connecting lines between everyone's.
And then Anna was doing all the technological side very successfully.
So yeah, as a live performance, it also happened live digitally. So we had like a live stream of the green screening happening, so we could see it on our screens, and it was being live streamed onto YouTube. And so the screens that we wove in between the trees became digital. This is just a little clip of what happened on the green screen. So we had an illustrator, Maria Quintas. She made us a really nice special animation, which is sort of animating the story of what happens beneath the soil within the network.
And the sharing of nutrients and water was exemplified in a very artistic way through this animation.
And a few more clips. And then as an extra special sort of addition to the day, we had Brendan and Amelia from Mycosia came and did a really fascinating talk, as well as a forage around the woods where we were weaving, and we found some incredible mushrooms. And we have Brendan with us today, who's going to talk a bit more about everything that we were talking about yesterday in a bit more detail, for you all to listen to now. So yes, very excited to continue the conversation, and we'll hand over to Brendan now.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me down yesterday to be part of the project. It's been really exciting, and it was a really good day, really welcoming. So thank you for that. So I'll just introduce myself now. My name's Brendan, and I'm from Mycosia. We're a company that set up recently this year. I'm just gonna screen anyway. I have that's worked. Yeah, cool. So I'm in the lab today, so we'll do a little look around it. But this is me in the lab. This is my little boy doing some log culture. This is my stepdaughter working in the lab as well. And then my awesome assistant and wife, Amelia, holding up my favorite mushroom, hen of the woods. I've been I'm an amateur mycologist, and I've been working with mushrooms for probably the last 5 years. So just to kind of say that most of what I've learned has been self-taught, and there may be some holes in my knowledge or things that I don't get perfectly right. So sorry to any mycologists who might see this and notice that I've pronounced things wrong or things like that. I'm also kind of on the neurodivergent, neurospicy section of the world. So sometimes I might ramble on about things or get stuck or something. So I apologize if that happens. So the other thing is that fungi is a really new field. It's only existed for 60 years. So lots of new information is coming out every year. So hopefully everything I talk about is kind of up to date. Just check. So do my slideshow. I thought we'll quickly whiz around the lab so you can see what we do here. So Mycosia was set up basically to get people to fall in love with fungi through gourmet mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, mushroom cultivation supplies and kits. So I'll just quickly whiz you around. This is the lab room with the flow hood, which is where we do all our clean work. We work on things like liquid cultures, which is where you can get mycelium to grow on liquid, which is pretty amazing. We do agar work, where we clone, this is a clone of a mushroom that somebody actually sent me through the post, is an oyster mushroom. From there, we grow things onto substrate bags like this. You can see some mycelium on some grain up here. Down here, this is where we try to grow cordyceps, which is an awesome parasitic fungi that I'll talk about later. And then I'll just take you through the hallway. I've got some cool myco art that you can just hopefully just about see there by a local artist, graffiti artist Soap, local to Derby. And then this is our massive grow tent with all its exhaust venting and pipes. This is where all the mushrooms are growing. I'll just let you get a little look in here. So we've got in here, got some oyster mushrooms growing, and some lion's mane, if you can see there. Oops, just zip that up. And I'll just get back into the labyrinth to continue the talk. So yeah. Yeah, my screen again if I can. Okay, so yesterday when we met, we went through some of the basics of fungi. So fungi is like its whole kingdom. It's a whole kingdom of things, and it goes from the tiniest, small, microscopic organisms like yeast that we get cool things like beer from, bread, all of those cool things. You also have tiny little mushrooms that live in our guts, much like bacteria that kind of help us to process our food. But then you also have mycelium mat forming mushrooms. So these come in various different forms. The first being parasites, or the first I'll talk about being parasites. So this is an example of a parasite. This is a cordyceps fungus. And this is a little rust fungus. So here's cordyceps in the wild. It grows off of insects and is also a medicinal mushroom that I have grown a few times. This is a rust, another rust on a plant. So the parasites are all sort of pathogens, and although they do have an effect or a detrimental effect on their host, they're actually really important in our ecosystems. The next group of mushrooms within this kind of mycelium forming group are the decomposers. Now this can be anything from kind of the molds that you'll find on things like bread or oranges and things like that. These molds also gave us penicillin, which is, as you kind of might know, is a medication. The other things that it gives us, the saprophytic fungi give us, are things that we can grow and eat, like these wine caps that were grown at my allotment, and these oysters, and all the things that we grow here, or the majority of the things that we grow here, are saprophytic fungi. Like this, there's another oyster here. Let's see, with cool gills. So the saprophytic or decomposing fungi are incredibly important. Although they're not the symbiotic ones, they break down all the kind of matter in the natural plants and even sometimes insects, break them down and release those nutrients into the soil for things like symbiotic fungi to pick up. This is a cool species, K. mutabilis, that I cloned from the wild. And then we get onto our symbiotic fungi. So symbiotic fungi are found in all habitat types and latitudes. They make relationships with about 90% of all plant species that exist. These are fly agarics in their different sizes as they grow. And these are mycorrhizal fungi. These are the fungi that we normally refer to when we talk about the Wood Wide Web. So these fungi are really awesome. What they do is they create a sheath, or weave a sheath around the roots of plants, where they exchange nutrients for sugars, basically. So they give things like sort of phosphorus, copper and iron, and various metals and other minerals to the plants that they need. And they get, in exchange, they get sugars that are made by the plant through photosynthesis. So many plants can have kind of relationships with multiple fungi, creating this web across a forest area. So some trees can have up to like 100 different partnerships that they're having, and a mycelium can kind of stretch for sometimes the whole forest, connecting multiple trees, and being connected to other fungi through those trees. Most of these mycorrhizals won't ever make a direct connection with another mushroom, but they will do through plants. The other type of fungi that isn't particularly shown here is endomycorrhizal fungi. This fungi, basically, the majority of it lives underground, and unlike the ectomycorrhizals, it doesn't form fruit bodies of any kind. So it lives completely hidden life underneath the soil, connecting plants and creating sort of the soil. In fact, so the main group of these are arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and they do more than just weave a sheath around the plant. They actually weave their hyphae deep into the root and even into the cell of the plants, where they can exchange the nutrients actually from within the cell, rather than kind of through osmosis from outside. So AM fungi are really cool as well, because they create a tilth in the soil. They create a protein called glomulin, and they create gloms, which basically stick the particles of dirt together to create what we think of as soil. Scientists used to think of soil as like an inert substance, whereas we now know that the soil is basically like a living skin that covers the entire planet. In 1 gram of soil, there can be billions, or millions at least, of microorganisms. There can be up to a mile of hyphae, which kind of sounds a bit weird, but if you think that your gut can stretch to like the size of a football pitch, you can imagine that microscopic cellular strands within a small amount of soil, if linked up, could reach those sort of lengths. I think it's said that the kind of the biome within soil, if we weighed it all, would be double the biomass of all the sort of mammalian life, or even animal life, which I think is pretty amazing. Orchids. So orchids are really amazing. These plants rely solely on fungi to actually to live, and sometimes for their seeds to germinate. So yeah, well, we talked a lot yesterday about how this mycorrhizal network can be linked to kind of different social structures. So one of the people we talked about, if I hopefully pronounce her name properly, is my man Arifin, who wrote a thesis called Mapping Alternative Futures Through Fungi. And when I was approached by you guys, I actually did a little search on various things and I found this person. I kind of felt like maybe she would have been a better fit to talk to you about it because her thesis is so perfectly aligned with your work. And basically, she talks about how the mycorrhizal network, this network of sharing between plants, it can be compared to a lot of the sort of self-help groups that were created through the COVID period using social media as a way of networking. Lots of people got together within their villages, towns, and cities and started sharing resources and giving help and care to each other, and how this was a very kind of socialist structure that mirrored a lot of what happens within a forest, and how that forest networks are, the forest is actually one living whole symbiotic thing. So she compares the network basically to the connections that happened through the internet. She talks about the glomulin, the gloms, and how they are representative of acts of care, sort of helping stick together these various kind of networks and kind of groups together. So yeah, she has she's written a really cool thesis which you can actually access if you look her up on Instagram. She's called Fungi Futures, so I recommend kind of checking that out. I see we're at about past, and I knew you guys wanted to stop at some point, so I don't know if you want to ask some questions or open it up to the field or where you guys are at.
I mean, we're happy if you want to keep going.
Like 50 minutes, if you have anything.
Yeah, so basically the other person I would like to talk about is Suzanne Simard, who wrote a book called Finding the Mother Tree, who's actually referenced by Maya Man, and that's because her work scientifically proved a lot of these theories that people were having. Or in fact, some of them were her theories. So she did a lot of work where she sort of radio tagged carbon and took several species and shaded them differently and watched how sugars were transferred between different trees and whether this was just a kind of a static give and take or how it was affected, and basically showed that trees that were shaded were being given more resources through the mycelial network to help them grow and thrive, and basically kind of proved this idea that these the trees have kind of somewhat altruistic kind of behaviors in terms of looking after their young, and kind of looking after the general health of the whole environment. And she also compares this to kind of different ways of working. I think there's a bit in her that I wanted to. So one of the things that is referenced in my man's work as well is how we've always had a very reductionist view of science. Like, we reduced soil down to the dirt particles, we reduced trees down to different species, and yeah, there's a little excerpt here that says, our goal is to further develop an emergent philosophy, complexity science, based on embracing collaboration in addition to competition. Indeed, working with all of the multifarious interactions that make up a forest, complexity science can transform forestry practices into what is adaptive and holistic, and away from what has been overly authoritarian and simplistic, which I thought was just like a really, a really cool way of looking at this network. There's a lot in her book about how sort of the information that travels along these networks is really similar to both the internet or our brain, in that these packets of information are sent through neural-like networks created by mycelium, and how a lot of it is about fostering the upcoming generation within a forest, giving them nutrients. There's this idea, I think, Joe, that you mentioned, of kind of paying it forward later.
Yeah.
Now and then paying it back, and then how like our cultures could start to mirror some of these ways of behaving, and yeah, so there's a lot of interesting similarities between sort of social networking and sort of non-hierarchical groups and ways of being with each other.
We have a question in the group, and it says, how long does it take for mushrooms to grow, and how long do they live?
That's a really good question. So in terms of mycelium, as it were, some people have postulated that mycelium, given enough food, can survive in, given the right circumstances, can survive indefinitely. We have some really ancient, like the largest organism and one of the oldest organisms on the planet is a mycelial mat in Oregon, from the honey fungus, and it's something like 2,500 years old. There's a lichen somewhere in Antarctica that's about 10,000 years old. And fungi spores, anyway, have been shown to be able to basically survive in space as well. So there's some interesting stuff in there. In terms of growing, when I'm growing some mushrooms, I do a lot of cloning. So what I've done here is I've cloned, somebody sent me a mushroom like this, and I've taken a little piece of it and cloned it onto here, and this will fill out within about 2 weeks. And I put that onto some grain, and that will fill out within another 2 weeks. And then that goes on to a substrate bag and about another 2 weeks. So from spore or clone, you can get to a finished mushroom within, if you're really, really lucky, within about 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks. And then you can continue to clone that mushroom and keep it alive. So most of the mushrooms I've grown for the last year of the same type have been the same organism, split apart and regrown hundreds of times. So yeah, they're pretty amazing creatures. It would depend as well, obviously, on the type of mushroom, but yeah.
Also, someone's asked, are fungi endangered by man?
Yeah, so various fungi are endangered because of things like climate change and habitat loss. So there are some fungi that are quite generalist. A lot of the saprotrophs are really generalist because all they do is break down matter, although some of them break down quite specific things. But in general, they do quite well. But there are specific fungi there are incredibly specialized fungi that live on only one insect or parasiticize only one insect. So every time we lose an insect, we'll probably lose a fungi. So because they underlay a lot of the whole world, whenever something within our web of interconnected species is affected, it probably affects the fungi as well. Obviously, we have massive habitat loss in somewhere like England, where we only have, I think, about 12 or 13% wood cover, forest cover. So the more habitat you lose, the more kind of ecology you lose. Interestingly, the lion's mane that I grow is a red list fungi in this country and is extremely endangered. You can't pick it if you find it in the wild, which is why people grow things like lion's mane.
Did they become endangered quite recently?
I don't think so. I think they've been on the red list for quite a while. But yeah, often it is habitat. Oh, there's some cool questions.
What percentage of fungi are toxic to consume?
So there's quite, I don't know the exact numbers because there's masses of numbers of species of fungi and so many more that we haven't actually found, but there's probably quite a small percentage on either side. Like I said yesterday, maybe like 2 to 5% that are edible, and then similarly a small number that are toxic, and there's quite a lot in the middle that are just kind of inedible or microscopic, so we can't see them. But yeah, in terms of toxicity, it's especially lethal toxicity. It's quite small. All mushrooms contain things that are difficult for us to process if we haven't cooked them. But yeah, in terms of like poisonous mushrooms, it's not a large amount. And another thing is, every mushroom in England can be touched and interacted with without being poisoned. You actually have to ingest a piece into your stomach, unlike plants where there's a whole load of plants that you get poisoned or stung when you touch. So plants are actually more dangerous than mushrooms.
Okay, this is quite a good question. Does agriculture affect fungi positively or negatively?
So this is a really good question. So certain agricultural practices can be really bad for fungi. The consistent tilling of fields, the use of herbicides, the use of overuse of fertilizers, all those things are really detrimental to soil health. Yeah, and because they just reduce biodiversity. So those kind of practices, large agricultural practices, can be very detrimental. But then there's lots of new styles of not new, but like kind of going back to old ways, but you kind of using organic matter, building up your soil web by doing things like no dig, using more natural composting methods. There's lots of people out there now doing amazing work on that kind of stuff. So yeah, it depends on the type of farming, but yeah, large agricultural farming is pretty bad for the whole biosphere. Yeah.
And do you see the other question? What is your favorite mushroom?
Well, it was hen of the woods that we showed earlier. I think that's my favorite edible mushroom. My favorite mushroom for weirdness is probably the zombie fungus, the cordyceps mushroom. But yeah, there are so many awesome mushrooms out there. Through this, reading about the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They're kind of my new favorite mushroom, because of the thing I was telling you about, where they have, instead of having one nucleus within a spore with one bit of DNA, they have anywhere between 80 and 35,000 nuclei with distinct genetic packaging in there. They're so weird that some scientists don't really think they're fungi. They might be something else, or they're not sure how to class them. And a lot of work has been done recently using genetic mapping to separate and understand different species of fungi that can't be applied to that whole genus of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, because of that nature of having so many different bits of genetics, sometimes including genetics from other types of fungi and microorganisms. So they have what are called morphospecies rather than species, because they're so varied and they don't really fit into our understanding of splitting things up genetically. So yeah.
One thing, earlier you tried to show us in the glass box behind you, but we couldn't see inside it.
Oh, just below it, yeah. So so down here, this is just my all of my different liquid cultures. So this is like the first stage of what happens with the mushrooms. Needs a little bit of a sort in here, but you've even got plates where the tiny little mushroom has decided to fruit.
Oh wow.
And then equally there's lots of liquid cultures that I probably need to restart, because they're starting to get what's called a pellicle at the top. I don't know if you see that.
What does that mean?
If you've ever made kombucha, a pellicle is like a mat of mycelium, well, sometimes bacteria, that grows on top of.
Do you have a question? I wanted to wait. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Oh, my question was maybe a bit of a tangent, but
Cool.
I was just wondering if because if you've done any research or know anything about like the sounds of mushrooms, because we were reading a bit into how some people really look into that, they actually kind of make sounds to communicate. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if the sounds of the communication, but the sounds are derived from some of the sort of electromagnetic pulsing within the mushroom. So signaling within mushroom networks along mycelium is actually done much like our neurons, but a bit slower. With some of it's chemical, but it's also thought that some of it's done by sort of sending electrons through electricity. So I haven't done much research on fungi music, but I have watched people go around and connect things up to mushrooms and plants and various other things. And it's pretty amazing, some of the sounds that they come up with. So yeah, it's a pretty cool field, and there's so many little subsections to mushrooms, so many parts of it, that there's just too much to learn about. But yeah, it's all really exciting.
Yeah, I think we were quite amazed about like how many different types we actually managed to find yesterday, and like, we just couldn't believe like some of the things that
exactly. And I think we were looking before for like more traditional looking mushrooms, but the more we looked, the more peculiar ones we found. Like after you left, we found these tiny mushrooms. I don't know if you can see them on the.
I commented on the thingy. I think these are actually another slime mold.
Okay.
So they're making those tiny little structures on the leaf.
They look like mushrooms, but
I think they're kind of. I'm going to show you. This is a really cool book for anybody who wants to get into mushrooms. Fungi of Temperate Europe. I showed you guys yesterday. I don't. I think I've only got volume 1, so it doesn't actually have what I was going to show you in there. But yeah, there's some slime molds that look very similar to that. But yeah, I'm not not particularly brilliant at identifying slime molds yet. So we'll see. This book is really cool because it shows the fungal world quite visually, so it uses visual keys. And this is just like a visual representation of all the macro sort of fruit body forming fungi that exist in the world. And like I was saying yesterday, there's many times more mushroom species than there are kind of plant species. It's estimated somewhere between sort of 2 and 10 million species. And the only kind of group that has more than that, I think, is possibly the beetles or the insects that have that kind of depth of species variation. So.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and unless anyone has any more questions, I think that's been another really, really fascinating talk, and everything that you were saying earlier about collaboration and what we kind of learn from this collaborative way in which fungi works. It really underpins all the ideas behind our project. What we're thinking about in relation to weaving.
Exactly, and we're really grateful that you came onto Zoom and told us about this stuff, because it allows there to be more access to this information than just the people who came to the workshop yesterday.
Yeah, that's really cool. And one of the lady that I talked about earlier, her whole thing when she wrote her thesis was all kind of about disability and care and access. So her thesis, unlike a lot of scientific papers, is totally free for you to download. So you can go and check out her work. If you guys haven't yet checked that link, I think you should have a read.
We'll put it up on our Instagram, I think, as well.
Yeah,
post it in our story so other people can find it too.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you again, and thanks again.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, and speak soon.
Thanks everyone who checked in. Bye.
Bye.